Hey everybody, this is Kenny with another edition of the Yak with Mac. Today we talk to Laurie Williams, Senior Facilitator for Leadership Training, and we really get into what leaders need from training and so much more. Listen in. Hey there everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Yak with Mac, and I have to tell you again, prepare to be inspired. I have got a great leader with us today. And so also prepare to learn, because we're going to get into a couple of topics that are going to be very, very relevant no matter where you're at in the country, no matter what division you're running things in. We are going to get into some great leadership stuff with this terrific leader who I've known for a long time. And so I'm going to just get right to it. Leaders, this is the place to come to. This is the place to be. We want to inspire and encourage you to be great, influential leaders today. And it is different to be a leader in 2021 than it is to be a leader when I jumped into the leadership workforce back in like 1985. So it is so different today. And we want to equip you with all those tools. And no better person than a person that I am looking at right now that can really drop some great knowledge on you and give you some great hints and tips so that you can get better to navigate here in 2021. Because 2021 is special, right? It's special. So I want to introduce Senior Facilitator for Leadership Training, Laurie Williams, in the house. Laurie, thank you so much for joining.
You are welcome so much for joining, and I am humbled by that introduction, and thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Laurie, let's get right to it. You've had just a fascinating career, and I think it'll be important that we take as much time as needed for folks that don't know you, which is not that many people, by the way, but for folks that don't know you to really hear about your career journey, and I know they're going to be inspired by it. So you can go back as far as you like to or as short as you like to, but walk us through your career journey.
My career journey has really been interesting, and I think typical of my generation, which is Generation X, that we went out into the workforce, and instead of with the intention of, okay, I'm going to work here and I'm going to get my 25-year pin and my 30-year pin, we have we went into the workforce with one thing in mind, and then we would shift again. So I feel like I've had 9 lives in the career force in some respects. I started off pursuing a Bachelor of Arts in Theater Arts at the University of Texas, and I completed that degree. But I've since gone on to do multiple certifications in my life, teacher training, as well as coaching most recently. And now I'm on to the next thing, and also considering, believe it or not, pursuing a master's. So that is my educational pathway. And parallel to that, in my career journey, I found myself in early childhood for a number of years. And through early childhood, started morphing into remedial education, children with special needs, not necessarily those with severe disabilities, but more so those with learning difficulties, such as, we talk about dyslexia sometimes, our midline issues. And from there, about midlife, I found myself in a personal crisis as a single parent and completely shifted gears. I had in college sold in retail, so to speak. And when I think back, Kenny, I wish I had been born like 10 years later, right? Because then in college, I could have worked in the wireless industry.
Yeah.
But instead, I was working more so with functional art, pottery, those kinds of things, as side jobs in college, because I worked my way through college. And I'm grateful for that. It took longer, but I didn't have all the debt either. So that was the trade-off for the 7-year BA plan instead of the 4-year BA plan. So I had some sales experience periodically throughout life. And at that crisis point, I knew I needed to make a shift. And I shifted into car sales of all things. One was a very specific desire to sell a car. I just wanted to do it. And the other was car sales are everywhere. They will hire you at the drop of the dime. Oh, do you have a pulse and you breathe regularly? Okay, you can come to our dealership and sell a car. And it took a hot minute to figure it out. It really did, But after I got into the groove of things, I loved it. And I would have stayed in that career path had it not been for single parenting. Really is not a game for a single parent who is the sole provider of a child's needs, because you're at the dealership pretty much 24/7. The only saving grace was I sold in Texas, and it's against the law to sell a car 7 days a week in Texas, or it was at that time. And
Oh,
most
wow.
dealerships
Wow.
chose to close on Sunday.
Oh,
That
okay.
was
Okay.
that was the yeah. There's
The
a
laws,
whole
yeah.
legal history behind all that, but without going down that bunny trail, I was guaranteed 1 day off.
Okay.
And then after about a year, I decided I can't do that anymore. But the irony was, and I've told you this story before, on my test drive, that I always use that loop for my test drive because it's good to have a pattern, especially as a woman, and everyone knows where you are, was a Nextel store. And I kept passing the Nextel store, and I kept thinking that store is calling my name. And I said to a potential buyer one day who did buy the Armada, okay, he did buy the car. I said, I'm really thinking about going in there and applying. And he said, well, you absolutely should. And when I hired on at Nextel, they wanted me to go into the manager and training program, but I declined. And I said, I need some time. I need time to work my way up from the entry level position, because I want to learn the ropes. I want to know what happens in the transaction. I want to know what happens with the systems before I'm managing those people and guiding them through it. And remember, a lot of the people I was working with were 10 years younger than me. And they were that millennial generation, the older generation of millennials. And I knew there were leaps and bounds ahead of me. I'd never used a PC. I'd only used Apple products. And I was older, and I needed to find my learning curve with Windows, which happened because I had the millennials to lean on. So thank you. I should say some of them are still with the company, and I should say thank you, Melissa Belcher, because
Wow.
you helped me
Okay.
with that.
Yeah.
And yes, so then from there, I knew from the first time I was in a training class, I want to be a facilitator. Well, I didn't say that. I said I want to be a trainer. Eventually, I learned when I became the trainer that it's I want to be a facilitator. And then I saw myself moving on to train other trainers and to develop them. And I found myself in that role. And now I find myself after integration in a leadership development role. But the golden thread through everything I've done in my entire life, whether it be working, with horses as a child and showing, steers or whatever, it is definitely that I am developing myself so that I can develop others. And I think of everything I've done. We always think about teaching and being a minister and being a fireman as a vocation, right?
Yeah.
And I remember that Dan Hesse always talked about leadership is also a vocation. It's a
Mm.
calling.
Hmm.
And that has stuck with me in many ways throughout my life.
Wow. 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 There's so much you said there that I want to go back to, but I love that last expression that leadership is a vocation and it's a calling. You're absolutely right. If we do it for the wrong reasons, like just for money or prestige or whatever, we quickly know that we're in the wrong business or the wrong part of the business when it comes to leadership. So right. You could tell me that story all day long. The car sales one, how you were driving around, you kept passing the Nextel store. I love that story, and it's look what it led to. Just you finally making the decision to, you know what, I am going to go in and I am going to apply, and Nextel to Sprint to now T-Mobile, and I love how you said the golden thread is self-development. That is just outstanding. I want to come back to that in 1 second, but what do you find? Because you were very specific on this as you were mentioning it, and this ties in. If I'm a leader of a team, what do you find as the differences between a trainer and a facilitator?
That's a great question. And, within training is fantastic and training is important too. And when we are working more in the modalities of systems and maybe even resources to a degree, the technical side, you really need to train and you need to lean into that side of your skills as a presenter slash trainer slash facilitator. But when it comes to those generative skills that really are essential to most of us, no matter what we're doing, whether we are leading an IT department or, working in a call center. Those generative skills or soft skills, that, as we often call them, that needs a facilitator. Because
Mm, hmm
as our mutual friend James Thacker used to always say, people don't argue with their own data. The only way to have them inform you of their data is to be able to facilitate it.
Wow. That is such a great distinction that I hadn't thought about for all these years, and it's great if I'm a leader to think about if I'm not a trainer, still as a leader I've got to train and to know the differences in that and facilitation. That's golden stuff. That is fantastic. Let me come back to self-development, Laurie, because that's been a big thing on all of my podcasts that I so encourage leaders to continue to develop themselves. And for a lot of reasons, they forget to do that or they miss that every day. What are some things two-part question, what are some things that you do to continue to develop yourself? And then how is it that you're consistent at it? Because you're just as busy, if not more busy than all of us.
We are all very busy. There is no doubt about that. And it's tough. I look back at growing up on a farm. We always had a rhythm because of the seasons. And that has helped me shape who I am, because you can't go out and work in the field if it's raining, right?
Mm. Hmm. Hmm.
And that's when you take care of other things, repairing equipment, or maybe if you have animals, you're doing something for them at that time. So that is one way externally you are informed by, what you're going to be doing because of the elements. But then
Mm.
there's also just that discipline, I think, that was instilled in me in a very early age and then reinforced when I was a teacher, that rhythm, ritual, and rule, those three R's,
Wow.
are
Wow. The 3 Rs.
very important to a a, I want to say a state of homeostasis, right? A
Mhm.
balanced, natural state in the body so that my nervous system is relaxed and I can then focus on what needs to be done. So this is kind of a funny thing. I was telling the story recently how my daughter shared with her boyfriend Monday was always clean sheet day. So that's just one example of rhythm, right? We always do that on Monday.
Yeah.
And I always try to set aside, this is when things happen. I always walk the dog at the same time. And I always, unload the dishwasher approximately at the same time of the day. And I always sit down and I give myself time to read and focus so many times a day. And I know that others are really good about, shutting off their social media or their notifications in Slack and Outlook so that they have that focus time. And So that's one way, rhythm, ritual, and rule, and then just being disciplined about what you do to achieve it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And, I love that because the advice you're giving is you probably in your personal life already have some rituals in there, right? And some rhythms that you have, such as, Monday's clean sheet days. So I just heard my mom's voice in my head because that was a thing in our house as well. And then just incorporating that into that time of self-development. I love that. That is absolutely fantastic. Um, Laurie, I want to get into a topic with you, and I think that I don't think I know that you are the right person for this. I want to talk about how leaders can really navigate the waters, so to speak, in 2021. It's already been a year, as was 2020, and there are so many great things happening. So, we're definitely not on the negative tip. But on this tip, I was thinking the other day, I was talking to a leader that's out in the retail stores, and they really, really struggle with navigating the waters of the pandemic and really, adjusting their styles to Generation Z. And so what are two or three things that you see in your travels? Because you're always talking to leaders, always training leaders, facilitating with leaders. What would be two or three things, pieces of advice that you would give leaders today to help them navigate those really rough waters? And things aren't going to get easier the rest of this year. We're almost right up on that special launch. We're almost right up on Q4. And so things aren't going away. What are some things that you see and that you would advise leaders that would help them kind of navigate the 2021 waters?
That's such an amazing question. And, we talked about pandemic fatigue over a year ago, didn't we? We
Yes, we
were
did.
already saying it last year around September, October, pandemic fatigue. And now we're past that. We are really fatigued by this. But I think that the number one thing I would say is, first of all, trust. People are much more resilient than what we know. And this generation in particular, remember, Gen Z is the one that has had their entire life informed by post 9/11. So they were either very, very young, my own child was just a few months old,
Hmm.
or they were born after 9/11. So we often think about the greatest generation, right? Our grandparents' generation, yours and my grandparents, their great grandparents. But I think this might be the next great generation, honestly. And I don't just say that because I have a child in it, but because of the work that the millennials have done before. And I am grateful to the millennials because they have really pushed the needle for us in many ways, that things that needed to happen, right? And I could go down that honey trail all day, but I want to say thank you. And then with this generation, beyond the resiliency, I think we have to show up with a great deal of intention. So we are always changing, shifting, pivoting. That's the nature of telecommunications because things happen so quickly within technology. But when we make decisions and we put them forth to our teams, we have to show purposefulness and intention. So those kind of go together. So I'm gonna group that as my second one. So intention and purposefulness and then resiliency before that. I think that also, just to add on to purpose and intention, that really helps give the why, and that's a major part of what it is we do.
Mm-hmm.
And when we lead, is helping those that we lead understand and digest the why. Otherwise,
Hmm.
they are in that constant state of over agitated, in their nervous system or their limbic system, whatever you want to call it, from a physiological standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way they can get into a relaxed state of homeostasis and be able to focus and sell. And then the third thing is listen. Listen, it's the biggest gift we can give another person. Yeah,
Mm.
I can buy you a nice, purse from Hermes or whatever, but really what my daughter wants is for me to listen to her.
Mm.
And she knows when I'm not listening. And I guarantee that everyone in this generation knows that too. And it's the best thing we can do for them. And maybe we can't change what they're asking us to change if they're asking a question about change, but at least they can feel heard and valued.
Mm. Mm. Laurie, that is fantastic advice. Um, I want to dig just a little bit deeper. You mentioned the post 9/11 generation. That is such a real thing, especially my son also just turned 20, my youngest son, and so around the same age as your daughter. And so how are I think it's hard for him to articulate actually how 9/11 has affected him, right? Because he was a baby, he was just born. But as he started to learn about it in school and realizing by the time he got into, the second, third grade, that this was a thing that happened when he was here, as opposed to learning stuff that happened well before he was born. He's picking up a textbook now, and
Mhm.
seeing, wow, I was actually born then. How, even with something like that, how do leaders actually, and I think you answered it really by saying listen, but I think there's more there under how do leaders become more aware of how the things that have happened in this generation has impacted the folks that they're bringing on board today? And then what do they do with that?
Oh, wow. um, I think, in part, my answer about listening, right, certainly will help bring about a different relationship cross generations, and also, cross positions. And I think that when they do bring us ideas about maybe their viewpoint, how they would change something, it's important to be flexible and to try some of those things on. Okay, we did try that before. Sometimes as an older generation, we go, oh, we tried that before. Well, so does that really mean you can't try it again? Because
Right.
now
It's
you're
great
trying it with a
advice.
completely different workforce. And I think, part of your question was also about, how can they just generally be more informed? I want to think about that a little bit more, but off the top of my head, how I would answer it, and I might answer it differently. That's why I'm going to keep thinking about that question. So I might answer it differently later, but for now, I would say just really uh, taking the time to be present with them and appreciate who they are.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think everything you said, the trust, right? Starting there, and you have to trust what you're hearing is so, right?
Yes,
And then the listening part of that is so important. In our fast-paced world, it sounds very easy. Yeah, I'm a good listener, but man, if I'm in a retail store, if I'm in a call center, there's a million things going on at one time that could take me away from that, including my phone, right? And my device. And so, no, you answered that perfectly. I was thinking about my 16-year-old who just got her first job, and I had to really talk to her about because she's so used to and attached to her phone. She's had it for several years. And so I said, you're not going to text message this interview. You're going to actually have to look somebody in the eye, shake their hand, introduce yourself. She
Mhm.
struggles with that. And so I think that I hope that her new leader, where she's going to work at, she's working in a retail clothing store. I'm hoping that they're patient, right? And they take the time because she's going to have to talk to customers as they walk in. And, she's not used to that. She's used to exchanging text messages. I says, when was the last time you called your friend? I mean, actually had a phone call. She's like, I really haven't. I'm like, okay. It's definitely so different. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, fantastic advice. Um, how about the pandemic? I want to go back to that for a second because you mentioned pandemic fatigue, and we're even more in that now. Are there any watch outs for leaders these days as this has kind of come back around again, and we just don't know folks' home life unless we listen, unless we ask about things. What are one or two watch outs for leaders today when it comes to the pandemic?
Oh, it's so important that we are really mindful of our team's mental health and asking those questions, the powerful questions. What's emerging for you now is my new favorite question.
Hmm.
And it can be brought to anyone almost in any situation because as we were working yesterday with the neural leadership team, David Rock's initiative, and the facilitator spoke about open loop questions being so important for our brain. And that is an open loop question of what is emerging for you right now. And you might not ask it that way to everyone, but you might just simply say what is happening for you right now. But powerful questions, which can really help us understand where the other person is at. What is their state of mind and being? And you do a great job of this too, Kenny, in terms of when a response is given, even if it's just that last thing that that person just spoke about, then ask another question about that last thing that they just said. Even if you can't in your mind go back all the way to the beginning of what they said. So I would say mental health is really top of mind for me. And I think many of our leaders here at T-Mobile do a remarkable job from John Fryer on in his team and his senior leadership team. I really appreciate and am in awe of how they bring that to the forefront because it's essential.
No doubt, no doubt. Wow. I could listen to you all day. I could talk to you all day. I probably have a million other questions, but I'm gonna start to leave it here because you've given us so much, and I know you'll tell me yes when I ask you to come back on because you started to hit on mental health, and I'd love to get a little bit more into that. And we've had some really good examples of late with Simone Biles and the Olympics, at least bringing it to the forefront. And it's a real thing. I mean, there's some people that are like, oh man, she just quit or whatever. No, she didn't. It's just like, come on, could you do what she does? No, I told a friend of mine, I'm like, could you do that? Come on, man. So
Can't even stick the landing anymore.
oh my gosh. I used to could barely like put my leg over those when we had to do it in gym class in high school. But anyway, Laurie, this has been fantastic. And I'll capture in our notes a lot of the things you said. And leaders, please share this with not only veteran leaders. I think everybody needs this because the waters are tough to navigate these days, but especially for new leaders. And those are the folks that I really want to also capture, and hear someone as yourself that's so astute and tuned in to what leaders really need today. To really hear that advice from you has been priceless. So thank you, Laurie. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, Kenny, thank you so much. And I will come back anytime.
All right. Well, that is awesome. Take you up on that. It's on recording, so we'll take you up on that. Well, folks, we'll wrap it up there. This has been Kenny and Laurie with the Yak with Mac. We will talk to you next week. Thanks again, Laurie.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you.